interested in understanding what you're pulling from reading just the introduction alone. What is it saying? Why is that? My question is, why would you want to rebel? What's the goal behind rebellion? So, I hear what you're saying, and I think if the goal behind rebellion is to have my way, what happens when one wants his way? What are they going to do? What are some side effects of a child that wants his way or her way? Or their way? And what are some activities that they do showing rebellion? So, okay, I got you. So this matter of rebellion is manifested in tantrums, stomping, screaming, sulking, sometimes silence. What are some other things? I didn't mention a whole lot. I just kind of just maybe 5. Give me about 2 more. Tantrum, stomping, screaming, sulking, silence. What else? Okay. Murder. So these are side effects of rebellion or manifestations. So when I see someone doing these things, usually it's at something else. What is rebellion's focus? I know that you would say self, but what is rebellion's focus?
Opposing whoever is in charge. Parents.
So the meaning behind rebellion is really to oppose authority. Right? Matter of fact, in this case, we're going to see a crew set up or groups of opposition. Conversations of opposition. And I'm going to put this up here at the top where I got groups of opposition. I'm going to use compositions. A composition of opposition. How does this start all together? How does the whole matter start? How does it start? Where does rebellion start? In the heart. So, it gets in the heart. It started in the ear. It started where someone began to talk, either to themselves or they heard someone else talking. As a matter of fact, generally you hear yourself before you hear anyone else talking. And you try to find a composition of people who will help you think similarly. They have conversations about the thing that you're really in opposition to. In this particular case, I think one of the major issues was the opposition against Moses with Korah. Korah, who, as you already know, is a Kohathite. And with that being in mind, he is involved with a group of people who are Reubenites. And that two groups of people will get together in their food, in their conversation. And they have a conversation about how to oppose what's already heard. And they speak into the ears of others. So now the seed that has been sown is sown in the ear. So it is the seed of rebellion. Seed of rebellion. And it always put into question everything that's already there. No matter what your answer will not be enough. Your answer will never be enough. I heard what he said, but I think it's more to it than that. And you'll keep saying that until you get more and more people getting on board with that mindset of we're going to try to destroy that. While they don't realize in their rebellion, even if they were to take authority, that same rebellion that's in their heart that they caused in others is now going to turn around on them. It actually becomes the very monster like Frankenstein that turns around and destroys everything that they create. So just like Korah, we have Absalom in the Bible, whose name means the father of peace. But what you'll find in many cases, these names give off some indications as to what may eventually happen in opposition to their name. Their names become contradictions just like their rebellion is. Because rebellion is to contradict leadership. And it starts in heaven or in the garden. And we think of a good example would be Satan himself, Lucifer, the angel. And what he does is when in the garden, these two ladies, or two people are in the garden, a man and a woman, I should say a man. He's in there speaking through his other portion of himself, which is happening to be his wife. She's Adam too. And you get the whole point that as soon as God said, you can't do this, you better not eat of the fruit, the contradiction of leadership is, oh, he didn't say that. You're not going to die. You're not going to die. That's ludicrous. That's not going to happen. So when you hear that, you start questioning it. So sometimes the contradiction of leadership brings questions. To question what is said. Matter of fact, it's not even questioning what is said. Mainly, it's questioning who said it. The focus is on this authority. If I can deride you and undermine you, if I can berate you, if I can show that you don't have what you need, or you're not all that you're supposed to be, I'm going to do this. I can spend my day. While you're working on something, somebody else is thinking on how they work you down, or whittle you down to nothingness. It's equivalent. It's a cutting back. It's like, I got to prove that you're, oh, he ain't right. We can do this. We can come against him. We can come against her. So you hear that all the time. So this is what, just in introduction form, what it is. The book says you should not do the rebellion. And I put in my acronym, don't be rude. Now, go back to the introduction and see the letters that I have there and see if you can find it. I'm going to add a word that's not there, and I'm going to put the word evil under here. But you're going to see other words that D, U, and R. So what do you see there? In the introduction alone, just going back to it, he says in the text, you must stop any pattern of one, disobedience. Mm-hmm. Right? So that is, don't be disobedient. What about the next word? Don't be what? Rebellious. There's that other word. And what is another word?
Unbelief.
Unbelief. Mm-hmm. Don't be unbelieving. Because what you start doing is sharing that unbelief with other people. So if it says don't be rude, don't be rebellious, don't be unbelieving, don't be disobedient, don't be evil. Because all these things right here equal evil. And that's what rudeness is. Don't be rude. And rudeness comes out of people. Lord help us. It comes out of people when they don't like who's in position. It's not that the person's not right or if there's anything wrong with the individual. I think the conversation that we're having here is, it's about, I want this power myself. I want to be in charge myself. And the best way for me to be in charge is to always consistently find flaws and faults and failures in you. Yes. And if I can find one fault or one flaw I can build upon, whether it be true or false. Because I can create my own God. And from that point on, I want to undermine you. I want to keep you down. Okay? So here's what we hear in the text. We are hearing that the wrath of God is getting ready to come. Because when we're rude and when we're disrespectful to leadership, I even check people's tones of voice.
Come on, Bishop.
I do. I listen. I say, wow, did you hear that? Did you hear that? And then, I didn't hear anything. Most people don't hear it because they have it in them too. It's hard to hear when it's in you too. It's hard to disrespect the person that you respect. But it's also hard to respect the person that you disrespect. So the repetitiveness of rebellion comes as a result of the heart of the individual. And they're consistently hearing over in their head, I don't know why I'm following this person anyway. I really don't get it. I don't know what makes me think. And then in our culture now, the culture we have now is, it wants to show you that, oh, so all you are just little sheep, you're just going to follow sheepishly behind this person, and you're not going to pay attention, you're not going to ask any questions, you're not going to come up against anything. But you ought to be able to ask anything you want to ask. You ought to be able to say what you want to say. You ought to be able to do what you want to do. Who tells you you can't say all these things? God. God said. Matter of fact, how God does it, he says, if y'all don't mind, I want to go to the New Testament for just a moment. Romans 13:1. In that passage of scripture, he emphasizes something that I think is quite interesting. Yeah. I'm going to throw this in the middle of the whole conversation. And I know that we're in Numbers 16, but Romans 13:1. What do you see there?
Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God.
God ordained the power. Michael-Angelo James didn't ordain himself, but he put himself in that. He put himself in that. No, he did not put himself in that. God organizes and orchestrates your steps. Order my steps in your word, dear Lord. That's all he wants you to do. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. You don't do what you do because you want to do what you do. You do what you do because you've been told to do it, and you're not going to oppose the authority that told you to do it. That's going to be powerful throughout the life. I have a little book that I like to read by Washington called Spiritual Authority. And in that book, we cover these comments and statements. We actually proved a good bit of this. I'll be putting that book back out again. One of our courses that we'll be teaching in our college course, as well as possibly some of our Bible studies. I'll be putting different books that we've used in times past to re-emphasize and reiterate what we're actually walking into in our world now is a repeat of the past. And so the emphasis in the text is, why are we repeating the same things? Why are we doing the same stuff over and over and over? Why can't we learn from others' mistakes? These things happened well before AD. They happened before Jesus' time. And in that same note, you're seeing the same murmurings, grumblings, mutterings, that cold silence. Someone says something to them. Turn their head like they can't hear. Dogs do it. People do it. It's in the earth realm. Sulking.
Yes, Lord.
Pouting.
Yes.
And look like when we get older, we stop that foolishness. But no, now we're going to screaming and raging. And then stomping and walking hard and treading like we're in warfare, the warfare tread. What that means is that we're trying to step on something and we're having champions where we're throwing things, slamming things. Oh Lord, it's all of it. It's throwing, slamming. It's, oh my God, it's cussing. It's everything. I mean, it's just tantrums. I mean, my God, it's all out there. It's just big, bold, loud. You know, it's all of that.
Yes, it is.
Right? And then you see the little children, you stop it. And they imitate you. Wrong code. So we oftentimes are dealing with what has been demonstrated. And demonstrations of sorts actually enter the ear, which is the center of the heart. Most of what we hear, the ear is from what mechanism we hear. What we hear determines how our heart receives it. True. I think about passages of scripture that really stand out to me sometimes, especially one passage in the book of Luke that says, be careful how you hear. Because if Jesus is talking there, and if you hear things a certain way, you interpret them from how you heard it. It may not be what it's saying, but it's how you interpret it based upon how you have had experiences in times past. And we like to recall things that have happened in our past that seem similar to what's going on, when in reality they may not even have any connection. They have no interconnection, but they may be, I want to say, causation is not determined by correlation. Causation is not determined by correlation. Some things, look, you try to correlate certain things, but they're not the cause of the thing. Good example of that, the boys played a ball game and they all had on specific jerseys. They came in the stadium a certain way. Somebody was in front, someone was inside. And this is my winning jersey, so we can't wash it till we win again. I got to wear the same jersey. We got to walk in the same way. We can't lose our routine. What do we do? How do we do it? So we correlate our win to what? Our behaviors before. So we think that the behavior before will make this be another cause for winning. So causation is not always determined by correlation. And causation also leads to the effect of a thing, the result of it. Why did that happen? Cause and effect. So I go back in here and we're going to see, they assume that because they are in positions of leadership, we don't really say what we want to against Moses and Aaron. That is not so. I mean, the couple of next weeks, this week and next week, we're gonna be dealing with this. This week we're dealing with what's going on as far as the rebellion and the coup that's been created. Next week we'll be dealing with the side effects, the actual judgment, condemnation that God's gonna give to people as a result of their behavior toward us. What's the sense? I think it's not Moses or everyone, but anyway, toward the people of God, yeah. All right, here we are. So let's go further now. I did a good bit of talking there, but I want to kind of bring that in. And as you can see, going back to Romans 13:1 just for a bit there, the one called God ordained the powers that be. Even if we don't like them. I hear people talking about different presidents. I'm like, okay, yes, they can say all they want to, but they only have a level of power. But there's something in the hearts of the people that already was there. And all they did was speak their truth, their belief system. People heard it and were activated. Oh, we going back? Well, let's go back. Again, always going back. We're repetitive. We want to go back to what we were doing. Where we were in charge, not these other folks. You understand? And see, I think this is going on with Korah and the Balaam. You're seeing this foolishness. In their hearts, they're leading in their groups and everybody's following them. And now they don't want to be told what to do. I watch our presidents and our governors have interactions and interruptions within their relationships because one is of a certain party, another is another party. And so when the president speaks, the governor says no. But when the governor speaks to the citizens of the cities, have to comply. And if they ever come against what the governor says, if you've noticed this in the last couple of years, you're watching from mass mandates, all the way down to vaccinations. Well, that's affecting me down here in Southeast Georgia. Although I only have maybe about close to 15,000 people that I oversee, those people are responsive to what I have to say based on what the president said and the governor said, not what I say on it. So even if I go back and push and say, well, this is what I don't know what he said, but we don't have to do that. So you'll have people coming in fighting us, really trying to hit him. But they're also coming after us too. Because we're targeted. You'll see it all the time. It happens all the time. And I don't care what hue of skin they may be in. They feel like they ought to be able to get their way and have it today. Let's read before I go into that. Korah Rebels is our title of the overall heading. And I want to move into the first read in the expository rights. The rebels assembled together, and we see that with a note here about the coup and competition. Read.
Unfounded resentment against Moses and Aaron continued. And in this week's lesson, we see a new group of insurrectionists rising up against God's appointed leaders over Israel. Insubordination was a very real problem for the Israelites after they left Egypt, as the former slaves were not content or satisfied with God's direction in spite of his faithful protection and provision for them as they wandered through a foreign wilderness. The leader of this latest insurrection was a man named Korah, a Levite who was the grandson of Korah. Korah and his children had been chosen by God for the special service of transporting and caring for the tabernacle and its furnishings. Although not a priest, Korah was a noted leader among the Levites. Allied with Korah were Dathan, Abiram, and On, all of whom were Reubenites, descendants of Jacob's eldest son, Reuben. Since the Reubenites and Kohathites both camped close together on the south side of the camp, it is easy to see how men from these two groups would have conversed and conspired together. Together, these men assembled a group of 250 others to join them in their rebellion. They were not just a random collection of men from the people. They were all respected chiefs and leaders who were well known among the people.
So what we have here is a leadership conference. All the leaders are gathered together against the upper leaders. And multitudes of people sometimes think, well, the majority wins. Yeah. So if all of us get together, and these were not women in this conversation, these were all men. These are all men leadership development conversation. And notice that they've conspired, they're conspirators who have come against Moses and Aaron to sabotage the work that God had given them to do. And you know, if men are talking, their conversation sometimes spills down into their children and into their wives, who speaks to the children. So the children are going to hear it more than once. And even create games around it. Even in their play, they'll be talking and having conversation about the various things regarding Moses and Aaron. Not that I can see that in the text, but just say, I know that children oftentimes create games out of things that they're involved in, or they've heard. A good example of that would be when the Black Death came in England. At one point, they felt like when that disease came as a result of the rats, bubonic plague and different other diseases came because of rats, they would sing, they would join hands, and what they would do is put roses and posies and all kinds of things on them because the flowers were supposed to be good smelling, and it also gave them joy to have those. And by playing those games, they lived on. So they would sing a little song as they danced around the circle. What do you think that song is?
Bring around the roses.
Bring around the roses, pocket full of
Roses.
roses. Well, why would you?
All fall down.
Now, what just happened?
People die.
Death. Even in that, they're demonstrating, they're talking about death. Same thing with some swimming games. Various things that all those are side effects. Those games came from what was actually happening, and it was an indicator. It's the way you write history. You write history through songs. You can go back to why are we born, why we're going to other countries, why we're fighting all these wars, and we hear questions like, war, what is it good for? And then the person answers himself in the song, absolutely nothing. And the other one says, say that thing again. So you understand, the song is from songs and all kinds of things are being created here against Moses and Aaron. And you may not even know that it's going on, but now what has happened in one small group has actually served like a malignancy or a spreading of a cancer. It is just all over the place. So everybody's getting ready to rise up. And I'm not talking about in a good way, against Moses. Wow. So our first question in this exposition was, who was the leader? Who was the leader of the rebellion against Moses? And who joined it? Who was the rebellious leader?
Korah.
Korah. And who joined it? So one man spoke into the ears of others, and they created groups. Those groups were to correlate, to come into composition together to make a coup or conspiracy against Moses. Sometimes I see it happening, and I can't, as a leader, you can't stop it. You know it's happening. You can't, because if you kill one of them, all they do is replace themselves with another. I used to think, if certain folk were just going to heaven, I wouldn't have this problem. Well, now see. No. That spirit then multiplies itself. For every one that goes, there's 3 that return. With the same demon. It's a spirit. So you don't get away from things. Matter of fact, some things I help this Moses and Aaron, but some things are assigned to you. Notice that once he got over one insurrection and got over one situation with his own brother and sister, hallelujah, in his family, right up close and personal. Now we come over here to kinfolk and cousins. Oh, it's not over yet. Because after that, this happens. It keeps happening to the point that eventually he can't take it anymore. He's been holding back. And after a while, he's going to go out. Charges made against Moses. We'll go to number 2 before we do that. Number 2, the question is, what 2 tribes were involved in the rebellion against Moses and Aaron?
Reubenites and Korah.
Yes. Reubenites and Korah. Let's hear that next read.
After giving his selection on rebellious cohorts together, Korah and his fellow conservatives angrily approached Moses and Aaron to contest their leadership. The people apparently had been growing increasingly restless ever since the 10 spies came back with their negative reports. Although God punished the spies with a plague that cost them their lives and pronounced judgment on the entire adult population, declaring that they would not personally enter the promised land, it was now clear there were still many Israelites who felt no loyalty to Moses or Aaron or to God for that matter. This large coalition led by Korah accused Moses and Aaron of going too far in exerting their authority over the people. At the heart of their protest was that all the people were holy, not just Moses and Aaron. As far as the rebels were concerned, they had just as much right to leadership as Moses and Aaron, because they too were set apart to God. Since the Lord was among all of the Israelites, Korah and his supporters asserted that Moses and Aaron were no different or better than anyone else. While it is true that God chose Israel to be a holy nation, set apart to him, personal holiness in their actions and attitudes was in large measure sadly lacking. The rebels then charged Moses and Aaron with appointing themselves as Israel's leaders. Yet God had repeatedly affirmed Moses' leadership. Moreover, the ordination of Aaron as high priest had taken place in the sight of all the people. There should have been no question, therefore, as to the validity of his leadership. While the Lord had a special plan for the Israelite nation as a whole, this did not negate his special call on certain people. The Kohathites were divinely chosen specifically to transport and care for the tabernacle. That responsibility was a very prestigious calling. However, Korah was not content to do what God called him to do. He wanted a high position, one that undoubtedly included the authority to tell other people what to do. Perhaps at issue 2 was the people's lingering desire to choose a new leader to take them back to Egypt. Korah may have been stepping up to assume that role. In order to successfully take the people back, however, he had to replace Moses and Aaron. Together with his fellow insurrectionists, that is exactly what he set out to do.
Take them back. Maybe it's a little really. Really we got to go back. We got to take them back to where they come from. And what they don't realize, they weren't where they thought they were. They were not in a good space. Sometimes people believe that they are as equal to what God has authorized. So they talk to them like that. One of the statements that I've heard in my life multiple times when people want to belittle a leader, he put his pants on one leg at a time as I do. Ain't nobody telling me what to do. Just like he does, just listen. He ain't no better than me. You hear that kind of thing? This is things people said about my pastors. When they got ready to honor them, if it was their birthday or something of that sort, and I remember this event. And it was someone I really loved. I couldn't believe they said it. I have a birthday too. They don't give me nothing. And I thought to myself, how interesting. This person is serving you. Then there was this whole other teaching against birthdays, period. That you shouldn't celebrate birthdays. It's selfish. You shouldn't have a birthday, period. You shouldn't even think about that. Oh, it went into something that happened to Job's children when they went into their group and had a party, and how they all were killed by God, and supposedly they were killed because they were celebrating a birthday. Now that's the implication. That's not in the Bible, but that's what they said. So, I mean, you start hearing all kinds of things that undermine the thing that's there in front of you, to take them back. The goal is to get your mind to say, you agree with me against this man or these men. And there's no small number of people coming against Moses here. It's a large, it's not a good little group. And people that were related to him are involved in this. So all we're hearing about the men, but there's like I told you, there's a contingent or a group, and that can be the people that have come together to come against Moses because they contend with him. That means they're fighting him. So I don't think I put that word on the board, but the word here would be contention. Strife, fighting. Certain things that I might say, no, I don't think we need to do that. I don't see why. I don't see why. We all get to do that. Then I say, I think we need to do this. I don't see why. Why we got to do that? No matter what I would say, it's going to be that person with that rebellion in their heart, and they will get them a group of people. And it doesn't take long because there's always somebody going to disagree with authority. I don't care who the authority is. You might like them while they're not in authority, but as soon as they get put in authority, they think they got their little position. Come on now. It goes that way. It starts switching just like that. And you might have been a friend to a person until you got a position. Now friend become foe. And they'll hit the door. I'm talking about they get right on out of here. I can't stand it. You are. Why? Why you, not me? I've been in situations where I've helped other people, and you can see this in the text where God is helping those people. He's protecting them, providing for them, and yet they're still rebelling against him. He's like, what am I doing? I'm trying to do everything. But that's not God is questioning himself. But if you go back to the read, one of the things that I thought was quite interesting in the opening lines of, I think it was the second portion of the exposition. It says, this large coalition led by Korah accused Moses and Aaron of going too far in exerting their authority, right? At the heart of their protest was that all people were what? Holy, not just Moses and Aaron. Isn't that crazy? There's also another piece in there, I pulled it from just a little bit. I think it's in the dissatisfaction of people. Yeah. It's in the first portion of it. And it says, as the former slaves were not content. You see that? They're not content or satisfied with God's direction in spite of his faithful protection and provision. You see that? That's the first paragraph under the rebels assembled together. They're just not satisfied. Not satisfied with God's direction. Why? Because they're
in the wilderness.
Because they're in the wilderness. People always respond to testing in a different kind of way. Why we have to take a test? I remember when I first came here, I would give quizzes after each conversation. Instead of saying, what are your takeaways? I give you what I want you to take away. And I said, these are the points that I made today. And then I can go in the summary form. And then I pass out a piece of paper and say, okay, put your name in the right-hand corner, put the name, today's date. You have about 5 minutes. I'll get that in just a second. Can we use our notes? Somebody else reading that question out loud and trying to get the answer to other people, even though it's wrong. I'm not saying a word. So eventually I take the paper and I grade them. I bring them back with grades on them. Now that's when you come in here, fresh out of college, fresh out of school, fresh as a teacher, and everything I thought about was teaching. Just like doing that. That is funny. So here I am thinking to myself, this is 89, 90, 91, 92, and I'm just, and people don't even want to write their own name on these paper. Talking about, you might not be able to read this. I said, I can read it. I'm to the point I can read hieroglyphics. So you just write it down. That's all I do. Thank you very much. So I had gotten to that point where I was that person all day, every day, 24 hours a day, grading everything, grading everything. Even down to people sending me letters, I grade. I didn't want any correspondence going out to this church unless I had seen it, and I had approved it, I had ratified, I had to read over it several times. I took it through my grammatical thing that's in my head that I always do, and I'm reading and reading. Where was that? And I'm circling, rewrite the sentence, and give it back to them, tell them, okay, type it on. I need that, yeah, because they had to be typewritten, double space. Y'all remember all that? You weren't gonna hand me these papers so written. I was like, nobody, unless I gave it to you, and you had to write your name on it, and write the information out. And everything I said had to be on paper. Well, people hated that. Oh, they just despised it. Just like y'all laughed at it this year. It's like, thank God he got over that. I don't know how much I got over that. I just stopped because y'all frustrated yourselves with it. Not me, because I was glad to see you give me a piece of paper. Because I was keeping up with who was in attendance that way too. Because y'all remember y'all had to sign in to come in. You didn't just come into a classroom, you signed in. You also took the class, you gave him materials, I gave him materials back, and you won cards, course cards, that shows that how many classes you've taken and what you need to take and all that kind of stuff. Well, that was going on because in my head, I was creating a school of higher learning. So my thinking was, if I can get everybody to the point, not only are they reading, they're comprehending. And whether you believe it or not, every time I talk to you, I start saying, so what did you pull out of that? Let's build on that thought, let's layer it. Let me hear more. Give me some of your thinking. Well, he said what I was going to say. Well, if that was what you were going to say, you got more to say than that. So I want to hear that part too. Share that part too. Wow. Him and horn. Oh, no. There's some horn there. Put it out. Let's get it. So in my head, I'm thinking, I'm going to get you there. You may not want to go, but you're going with me. Well, here's the point. Most of the area talk, we got to get to the promised land, and the folks talk about, we ain't going. Oh my goodness. It's like a leash on a dog that just ate a fresh new leash. Praise God. But they never walked with a leash before, and what they do is put 2 feet down, sit on their seat, and hang it, and they move their head to the side, and they pull back, because I am not going with you. And that's the church sometimes. Take this leash off me, look at me and let me go. And that's why people would say, oh, y'all still out there? Y'all still there? Y'all putting up with that still? Y'all still being taught? Yeah, we like it.
Amen.
You know, after a while, you might resist the thing for a while, but well, it's not so bad. Then I start letting you do some stuff. You get up and teach. Now you talk a little bit. You teach in your class. So after a while, like this would be the ladies' class, I would just say, all right, ladies, y'all can go ahead, and the gentlemen are going to have their class. Because you notice, as soon as you start combining, they start disappearing. Are you hearing me? The only time you had me was like the first and third. That's the only time you got me. And then even on first and fifth. And when you did that, you know, you can watch the difference in that too. Because people like to be able to talk. I'm not talking. It ain't hard. I asked you a question, and after a period of time, I stopped and I said, okay, listen, what do you think? And then you might say something. I say, I like that idea. But nobody's raising their hand and chiming in at all when I get up. But if the doctor get up and start talking, you got people interacting. Same with Bishop, let's say, call him Bishop. Pastor Spring, same thing. If he get up and talk, they talk. When I get up and talk, everybody goes silent. Man, another word. So, my point, there's a reason for that. Because we rebel against the idea that I'm not going to get involved because I don't know what you're going to say next, and I might be wrong, and I want to be wrong. Thank you, Jesus. Hallelujah. I'll just sit right here and just soak it all in. And after the end of this day, I will say, oh, that was a good lesson, Bishop. Thank you so much. Wow. I got so much from that. And if I ask you, what did you get? Well, I got to go out. I talked to you a little bit. I know it. I've been here long enough to know this. So, Bishop, why do you know this and you still do that? I do that because it's just how I do it. And when you live with people, after a period of time, you know them, and they know you too. Now, Doctor, you want to share something?
Yes, I do. I'm not contradicting anything that you just said. But could it be that because you are the father in the ministry, and you are like the daddy in the house, and when you speak, you just want to be quiet and get it off? Could it be that?
It could be that.
Okay.
I'll let you have it. You just try to make me feel better. But anyway, it's okay. And I let it run out on camera. But anyway, point. I think about this sometimes when I'm at home. I say, And when people see me sometimes, you may have 5 lines. Folk will go every direction, but they will not come directly to me. And there's a reason for it. I know there is a reason for it. I told you yesterday. There's a reason for it. So it's automatically a piece inside of me that I have to have about who I am when it comes down to these kinds of conversations. I recognize you got to deal with confronting these spirits. How many know when you see rebellion, you know it?
Yes.
Even in an animal, you see it in the dog, you got his little ears back, you're like, okay, here we go. Go sit down. And they looking at the side of their head, on the side of their head, like, I hear you, but I ain't gonna do that. Now, when they've done something wrong, you also know that too. Have you been in there? They turn their head like they don't know who you're talking to. Because you know they're gonna immediately run up to you and want to play with you when they've done well, but when they've done something wrong, they kind of shy away from you. And that's the same thing with rebellious people. When people rebel and do what's wrong, they don't come. There's a separation when there's rebellion. And this is so I have a whole book on teaching regarding this. Most of it's when you deal with the spirit of rebellion, there's a whole lesson by Summerall. He does one, and then another person does a whole lesson on Mary Garrison on rebellion. But when I go back to my old books and look at some of the spirits, especially like the samples who write on it, it's some interesting things that people start doing when you see rebellion. And even if they tell you they're not being rebellious, you see it. I mean, once you've been taught it, you can't help but see it when it's there. It is obvious. It may have been oblivious first, but it becomes obvious next. You didn't see it at first, but once you see the signs of it, it just stands out.
So now we're going to see.
Oh yeah. You'll see it all the time now. You should see it all the time now anyway, but I'm not talking about just in here, I'm talking about everywhere you go. You see it on the news, you hear it in the conversations, yeah. You see it in the legislations, all of it. It's there. And sometimes, what do you think a leader should do in response to that? Now, I have to put this back. How should you respond when you see people rebelling?
That leader should remain positive and recall his assignment, his position, stay in character, not get out of character.
Well, that's good though. All that sounds good, yes.
Do you call them out on it?
That's right.
Can I tell you that as soon as you correct them, they become stiff-necked. That's why I wrote that up there. There's a scripture in the Bible that talks about whipping the rebellious. They stiffen their neck. they become more resilient or resistant.
So, for example, if I was being rebellious this morning, as you did, you will continue to let me be? You will address it?
I never have. As a leader, I would. I would call you to the side, talk to you, which I've done.
Yeah.
But when it comes to membership, can't. God has to. And you'll see this through the text. Moses falls down on his face, he gets down on his face in front of the people. And it's not because he's weak or watered down. But sometimes you opening your mouth just fuels the fire. You saying something to them. Now, in the case of my children, I want to drive rebellion far from me. I'm using the scripture. What I used to do, because we had a house on it, I make them write things down over and over again, hundreds and hundreds of times, and bring it to them, and go over every word, make sure they wrote it. And not scribble it and make some sound, you make something and say that is the word. No, it's not. You're going back and rewrite that. And then we review it periodically, go back to it. When I see them get ready to go back to that direction, again, I say, you remember writing it? You ready to write it some more? This time it was 2 times as many times as you wrote it last time you want to do it. I suggest that you correct this. I'm not suggesting that. You don't have to. You can write it. It's your choice. You make the decision. So what people don't catch right there is you're giving them options. I give them options. And another place is God will either say stay or die. In the case of the scripture, he's going to kill them. I don't have to touch his people because they're his people. Good, bad, or indifferent. Yes, I can confront the issue by talking about it because, hold on, I can say something about it, but talking to them won't even, because they know what they're doing. They are deliberate in their behavior. They're not doing it unintentionally. This is intentional. I meant to do that. I meant to say that. And they say it with the fervor and the fire they want to say it with. Most times people raise their voices against leadership. Children do it to their parents periodically. And that day they do, they have relatives. A bill, if you will. Okay, back to this. Where are we now? Okay, let's talk about it. This is Moses and Korah, right? Let's hear it.
When Moses realized he was going to have to deal with yet another rebellion, he fell on his face in front of his accusers. This was not a position of weakness or surrender, but of grief and mourning. The people were constantly rebelling against Israel's leaders and therefore against God himself, and Moses knew this meant trouble for the guilty parties. The trouble they would bring on themselves would spill over into the entire camp if the problem was not effectively and quickly dealt with. Staying true to his typical behavior when his authority was threatened, Moses did not defend himself but appealed to the Lord. He did not get into a shouting match with Korah or the others. He simply stated that the Lord will make it known who his leaders were. Moses had nothing to fear in this encounter because God had defended and vindicated him time and time again. There was no reason for him to get defensive against men. He knew were rebelling against God's authority, not just his own. God would clear the matter up and again leave no doubt as to whom he had chosen to lead his people Israel.
Now here's the funny part. God will do it, right? But guess who's going to get blamed for it? Moses. Even when God makes the correction, even when God steps up and turns things around, the person standing in front that you see is the one that's the target. Hands to God. Heart to God. Head to God. You're saying, God help me. And you give it to him. And you're still the target. There's a picture with your, listen, there's a poster with your face on it, And people got one in their homes just to throw target, play target practice. It's so sad when you read stuff like this and you start thinking, and then, who wants to be a leader when you go through this kind of stuff? You saying to yourself, child, you're not going to do that. Why did Moses fall on his face?
Because the people were rebelling.
Say that again?
The people were rebelling again.
Because there were people who were rebelling again, but it was not just against Moses, but against
God.
Against them. So when God, if you go back to our original thought here, God ordained the powers that be. So when you come against the powers that be, you come against God. I don't care if you think you're right. You may be right in your own mind, but when you come up against it, you know what I said, in your mind. But when you come back to this, because people tell them their own truth now. This is my truth. Okay. But that ain't the truth. My truth and the truth may not be anything, they may not be in tandem. Sometimes God takes us through steps and stages and struggles to get us to the thing He promised us. And we don't even realize that is a part of the process of getting you there. I got Canaan for you, but I got to get you through the wilderness. I got a test you got to go through, because what I want you to see, the whole purpose of them going through the wilderness was all about this right here. The heart. What's in your heart? What's in your heart? I mean, if you don't know, the state of the church, the state of the house, the state of the individual is in the heart of that individual. Because it's the centermost place. It is the place where all things and activities derive. They come from the heart. Out of the abundance of the heart, all these things are happening. So you can hear it. The heart is so connected to the mouth that when you feel something in your heart, you say it out of your lips. Or you demonstrate it in your behavior. If you don't, even if you mute, you respond. You don't have to even open your mouth. Your responses don't have to come out your lips sometimes. They come out the pores of your skin. You can be so angry with a person, you just go to perspire. Blood pressure go up. Heart start beating faster. You can't say it, but you want to say it. Oh, if I can just say it. It's all over you. I mean, it's all over you. It's all around you. And everything that you touch and say something to, it's like you got this touch, like Midas. And when you touch people, they get angry too. I'm upset about it too. For you know, you got your crowd of folk upset about the same thing. It doesn't take much. I've been leading people for such a long time, and I look at people sometimes, and they think, I am not a novice. I have no means. So, having had the opportunity to lead people from all realms and walks of life, and get involved with folks all the time, they don't realize they remind me of somebody else. Immediately I say, oh, well, okay, well, we'll see how that works. I do that all the time. In my head, I don't say it outside. But you can see it. You can see it on people. You can see, how many of you as parents have seen a child and you saw the behavior of that child look like the behavior of a child that was before that child? And say, they had just like so-and-so. And the other person is about grown now. And you can always say, okay, I'm going to do this. Because you said if I had it in my life to live over again, I wouldn't treat that one like that. I would train them this way, therefore they won't be like this. Now you're going to get this opportunity in this one. It might be a great grand, maybe a grand. But the cycle continues because what's inside your DNA is going to show up in your children. So when you know, I don't know what's wrong with them, why they act like that? Let's go back. Let's review the tape. You may have had some kind of selective memory loss, amnesia, if you will. But somehow they'll bring it back to your mind. Oh God, I remember when I did that. Yeah, some of that comes from them, some of that comes from you. Combination. Whoa, let's get one more question in here. How did Moses respond to Korah's dispute about Israel's true leadership?
He said,
What did Moses do?
he told him the Lord would make it known who his leaders were.
God mentioned it. See, people think it's an election that makes a decision. It's not. It's God. God ordained the powers that be. Okay, I want you fighting. I ain't voting for him. You don't have to. There was some times you never voted and you had the leader that you got. So tell God, thank you. God put whatever leader you had, from Nixon, Ford, Jimmy Carter, Reagan, Bush, one. Come on here. You got Clinton, then you went back and got another Bush, got an Obama. Come on here. And they went from Obama to Trump, and then, yeah, and now you got Biden. You think you made those decisions? You really think you made those decisions? Bless your heart. Let God use you, okay? Let God use you. Because we think we know what we're doing. We really don't know what's going on. Some folks don't even know why you chose whoever you chose. Because you don't know what a campaign promise is. Those promises they can't keep anyway. Most of that stuff they say they're going to do, they can't do because it's not within their purview. They don't have the power to do some of the stuff they're saying. Some of these little kids around here running calls. I thought about it. I said, well, okay, I think you can. See, you'll see them. Campaign is different from government. Moses didn't even campaign and got to be the governors. These men are campaigning for position. They're jockeying for power. And God is saying to them, you are not it, but you will be it. You want to be selected? I'll select you. But for what is a different story. Back to the story. So what else is next? Next line, read it.
Challenge to the challengers. Moses was a very humble man, yet he was confident that the Lord would defend him. He instructed Korah and his entire company to take censers with fire in them and bring them before the Lord the very next morning. Time was of the essence, for the insurrection could not be allowed to continue. The rebels either had to repent immediately or face God, but they would not be allowed to mount a further attack on the person or character of God, of Moses. God would make it known once again whom he had chosen to lead Israel. There was no reason for any suspense leading up to this showdown because God had made it abundantly clear in the past whose Israel's leaders were to be. Moses stood firm against the challenge of Korah and his company as he returned the words they had used against him, telling them they had taken too much upon them. They had gone too far. That is what they had accused Moses of doing. But he retorted that they, in fact, were the ones who had tried to grab too much for themselves. They were not satisfied with what God had done for them. Korah was not content with the special role God had prepared him for. Instead, they sought the preeminent positions of Israel's political and religious leaders.
Is that all we've been talking about? Political and religious leaders?
Yes, sir.
It seems like everyone knows what ought to be done when they're not doing it. Then when it's their time to do it, they don't know what to do. Or they try to do some of the things they said they were going to do, but because the atmosphere for that is not present, they can't do it. It's easy to sit around and talk about, well, Bishop did this, Bishop did that. Well, we got some good church. We did this right here, we did that right there. It's always easy to think like that because you're not in the space to do it. And sometimes it's difficult just to do simple stuff. So the complexities of doing complex, it's different. You got to get a choir together, get a group of people together and have a rehearsal. Most of you in this room at some point have been in a choir. And as president of the choir, I'm sitting right there. The red of the choir, singing in the choir. Oh, pretty much everybody in the room here been in the choir. Including I even sang in opera. So here's the key. things they thought already done. Down to uniforms and what we ought to dress like, when we should wear certain stuff. Whether we wear a robe or wear just a regular uniform. What songs we're gonna sing on Sunday will be arguments and time, and who's gonna lead is another argument. So you always have that person sitting there, I'm like, they sing all the songs. Don't let nobody else sing. They do that same thing with church. He preach all the sermons. We ain't gonna let these, I don't need to get these licenses if I'm not gonna use them. Then you open the door to let them preach, and you tell them to sign up for a time to stand up before the people. And they look like Chuck without a truck. They get that crazy up music till they come. So in reality, it's not that they don't have the ability or the room to do it, it's just that they don't want to when it's that time. When you give them that position to do it, they don't want to. I got people who want, they say they want to teach classes, but they don't show up to class to teach. My thinking is that most of us don't follow folk that we haven't seen. That's me. My thinking. Maybe y'all will. Most time we love folk from other places than we do our own, in our place. There's another space by itself. But certainly, they didn't love Moses. They hated Moses and Aaron. And you can see everything they were doing. Come on, let's do a reminder of privilege. Oh, that's a word that I've been dealing with a bit. It's a privilege. Let's hear it. Moses specifically called out the sons of Levi. Read it. That's his family, by the way. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
148, reminder of privilege.
Reminder of privilege. Moses specifically called out the sons of Levi who had joined Korah in his rebellion. They were seeking power for themselves and the prestige that came along with it. They were not satisfied that God had already called them to a special sphere of service. Sadly, the great privilege they already enjoyed was not enough for them. This type of attitude is also prevalent among modern-day Christians, much to the detriment of the church. Some are not content with the positions God has called them into and resent the spiritual authority that has been placed over them. Instead of simply and faithfully serving where God has placed them, they rebel against pastors, elders, and other leaders. This kind of behavior causes dissension within the body of Christ. In the body of Christ, it leads to division, as it makes others feel forced to pledge allegiance to one side or the other. Moses asked the sons of Levi if they considered it a trifling thing to have been singled out from the rest of the Israelites by God to serve the Lord in the tabernacle and to serve his people. They may not have held the most glamorous position conceivable, but it was still very significant. We should consider it an honor to do anything the Lord wants us to do. To desire only those positions that bring visibility and public acclaim is a sign of immaturity and selfishness. Some positions are obviously more visible than others, but the Lord determines who serves in what roles.
I guess we had that conversation. And so when we get into something of that sort, and I think about this, even in roles that are visible, people can still have you. I'll say that and be done. This one's the next one. Charge of rebellion. Weird.
Moses continued to question the Levites who were associates in the rebellion. Now he reminded them that their appointed servants had brought them near to God. They encamped near the tabernacle, and their servants brought them into frequent contact with it. They were literally close to the earthly presence of God manifested in the tabernacle. Their privileged role should have been more than enough for them, but it was not. Moses asked the challengers specifically why they were grumbling against Aaron. These Levites apparently were upset that Aaron had been chosen from among all the Levites to be the high priest, and that only his sons and future descendants could serve as priests. They were not satisfied with being servants of the Lord in the tabernacle. They had their eyes on the priesthood. The rebels were not really grumbling against Israel's human leadership. Their complaint ultimately was against God. They did not like and did not approve of God's selection of Moses and particularly Aaron. Jealousy filled their hearts, leading them to oppose God's already clearly revealed will.
Do people fight God?
Yes, sir.
Most definitely. Couple of questions here. Number 7 says, well, did we do 6? What did Moses tell Korah and his men to do the very next morning?
Bring the census.
What privilege did Korah and the other Levites already enjoy? What were they already doing?
Serving God.
They were serving God, weren't they?
Yes, sir.
Our service to God, no matter what capacity we're in, we ought to be thankful.
Amen.
So you don't see certain ones here, that means you got to step up. The next line of recourse has to step up to it. Because they all had died and buried in the grave. What do? You got to step up to the plate. Now I got a deacon that's sitting in the deacon corner. Well, why? Because there's no deacon over here. Come on. So what we're saying is that we're going to fill in the spaces. But in the old church, you couldn't have done that. In the old church, it would have been a whole lot of other stuff going on because what you doing over here? Get your, brothers rough back in the day. So, they said words that you don't think the sense of the word. But in my point, I don't think to myself, you had a different mindset. But the mental acrobats that's going on in people's head right now, people jumping over hoops and loops and just doing things, I wonder sometimes, where are we? When it comes down to loving what God gave us to do. Where are we? Do you love what you do? Are you putting all you have into that? Or are you scandalizing and criticizing other people for not doing what you do? Because we do that too. Either we want the position you have, or we want you to do the position we do. It's almost like they want to relegate Moses back to a position that does not belong to him, so that he would be so sidetracked from doing what he's supposed to do that that would give them more reason to talk negatively about him. And the focus wasn't even on Moses from the beginning; it was on God all the time. They were frustrated because God gave them specific things. So how can the pot?
Come on now.
Get hot because I didn't want to be a pot, I want to be a cup. There were vessels made of honor, vessels made of dishonor. There were vessels that were brought into the king's palace, and there were some that went to the commoners. Here's the problem. We want to be in the palace, but we don't know how to act palace-like. I don't know how much information we have. The information doesn't make us the person in charge. I know more than they know. I can say, so, and why? What? Wives know sometimes more than husbands, but that don't mean she's a husband.
Amen.
Speaking in the mic, Bishop. Are you hearing me? The goal is to help each other. When I don't know, you know, help me with it. Don't sit there. I ain't telling you that. Just find out on his own. Well, you somebody special. Special lady. Sorry. Don't say anything. Don't let this call touch you. Just think. Think before you hurt yourself. David Dathan, Abiram, let's hear them.
David and his brother Hiram represented the Reubenite contingent in the rebel coalition. These two refused to come before Moses when called to do so. This shows that they were fully entrenched in their cause and had no respect for Moses' leadership or authority. To flatly refuse the instructions of a God-ordained leader was the height of rebellion, as it showed disrespect not only to the leader, but also to the one who appointed him.
See, that's big stuff. To reject that leader and to show that disrespect toward that leader is not just disrespect to that leader, it's also disrespect to the God that put that person in position. But sometimes people show disrespect in many different kinds of ways. They do things that they know is outside of God's word and God's will. Is that possible? Do we see it? Do we know when we see it? What do we do about it? That's the question. What do we do about things like that? If you see rebellion, how would you respond?
I quickly respond by praying and interceding. Hoping that God will shed some light so that they can see that they are off.
But aren't people blind to God?
Because I know if I jump in, I'm already facing attack already. And I don't mind it, but sometimes I will not be hurt off the top. But then I do jump in and face it, you know. First I pray. And then I may try to shed some light by the word or an example.
Have you found that that happened to help anyone?
That's the truth.
Brother Lucian, give him that Saturday home. So, give him that. So, here's the next piece. Yeah. So, what do we have when we have rebellion in our heart? And you're trying to get it out of that heart. How do you get that out of the heart of a person? Is that hard to do? Because somehow it's bound in the heart of that person. You don't just extract it. You don't do it. You can't do surgery to pull it out. Okay, back to this. Let's read the last piece. I think we're in the last one. Read it.
The depravity in the hearts and minds of the two Reubenite brothers is further exemplified in their specific choice of words in describing Egypt. They asserted that Moses had led them out of a land flowing with milk and honey, which was exactly how God had described Canaan. Their use of this phrase to describe the place they had been delivered from was a deliberate insult and challenge to the Lord. At no time during the long years of Hebrew slavery was Egypt ever considered a land flowing with milk and honey. For the Israelites, Egypt was a place of cruelty and bondage, not prosperity and opportunity. To further their case against him, Dathan and Abiram accused Moses of making himself a prince over the people of Israel. Their complaint was that Moses gloried in his authority and superior position. They did not view him as a compassionate leader who loved them, but as an opportunist who was trying to take advantage of a terrible situation and exploit them for his own benefit. Dathan and Abiram continued their rant against Moses, next accusing him not only of bringing them out of a land flowing with milk and honey, but also failing to bring them into a land that fit that description. Moses had not come through on what he had promised, and they considered that sufficient grounds on which to challenge him. To make matters even worse, Dathan and Abiram then asserted that Moses wanted to put out the eyes of these men. While this may be a literal allusion to the people dying in the wilderness, it is probably a figure of speech, similar to when we speak of pulling the wool over someone's eyes. In this case, they clearly would have been accusing Moses of deceptive practice, blinding people to his failures and true motives. Korah, Dathan, Abiram, and the other 250 men clearly had an agenda. They opposed Moses for personal reasons. They were not happy with his leadership, and they saw an opportunity for themselves to seize upon the dissatisfaction and fear of the people and wrestle leadership away from Moses and Aaron.
So So I don't like you, I don't like what you do, I don't like how you lead, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to sway other people in my direction to fight you. That's Absalom. And that was with his own daddy, by the way. So you got the side effects and the flow of people saying certain things. All right? So why was Dathan and Abiram's description of Egypt a direct insult to the Lord? Anybody?
They described it as he described the promised land.
Exactly.
It's like saying that, you know, we had better than you. And now you're trying to act like, you know, you're going to give us something better than what we had. When reality was, they didn't care whether they was getting what they wanted or not. They just wanted what it is that they was living at. Sometimes we can set our eyes on something, you know, and we want that thing until somebody actually shows us how much weight it is of carrying the thing that we wanted so bad. You know, it's like people want a big house until they find out all the big bills that go with it. They want a big church until they find out all the big bills that go with it. And then they say, well, dang, boy, I done put myself in a situation I don't know if I can get out of. And this is the point I want to make. If God brings you to a place, it's a prepared place. And a lot of times people can't see the preparation that God will do to a person. All they see is the prepared place that God put him in.
And you're right on point. You summarized some of the things we were saying earlier, and that I think is very good. Because we don't know what the weight of training is on an individual. We don't know what a person goes through to get to the place they're in. And when they got there, what requires them to, how can they remain in that space? Have you ever been in a space and you said to yourself, Lord, I don't know, I should be crazy. Well, somebody before you was. Somebody before you who would have gotten in that position could not have held that position in the manner that you hold it. Why do you think? Because they weren't anointed for it. Or the anointing had lifted. People tell me, oh, you should be in a bigger place or another space. And I think to myself, that sounds wonderful. But until the Lord prepare a place in another space, I'm sticking with what he gave me. You better be thankful for what you got. We always think about how to get somewhere else and do something else. Thank you, God, for right now, right here, and right now. Yeah, right now. Thank you. Hallelujah. Praise you, Jesus. Because even if I got a house full of crazy people, if that was even what God gave me, I thank him for him. What you did. Thank you. But if he had given me a house full of crazy people, he would have known me to deal with the crazy people. And y'all laugh for a reason. But anyway, number 10, what Nathan and Abiram, first accused Moses, what did they tell him?
Making himself prince over people, yeah.
Yeah, you gloried and you made yourself this. Now, ain't that foolish? We go right back to Romans 13:1. What does it say? God ordained the powers that be.
You know, that's another thing that we see too in the day's time, that people feel like the audience is praising the pastor. You know, so the people that don't know God look at it from an experience that, you know what I mean, oh dang, they shouldn't be doing that. But the people that know God know that they glorifying the God that's in the man. So it's not like you'll ever praise a man, because God don't want no man bowing to another man. You know, it's like when you stand up in the courtroom, the judge walk in, the man holler, all rise. That's a sign of respect, you know. But when we all rise in here, it's like, you know, what we're standing up for. You know, we have all these different little things that run through our mind when we don't love God. First, the relationship got to be right with God. And then all the other understandings that come along with it, you'll be able to grab. You know, I see a lot of people wrestle with, man, I ain't going to no church to praise no man, but they don't love God.
You answered about the question too. Because there's a few places that I know, especially in Asia, you do bow to a man. And you bow because out of reverence. You bow at the waist, and if you've done something wrong and you're sorrowful, you fall to your knees. And you bow your head to the ground in humble submission and sorrow for what you have done. But because we're in the West, where we've taught them, we stand up for our rights and we can shoot anybody we want to and treat anybody any kind of way we want to, that's where our trouble comes. Because we've got in our head, we got a twisted thought. on how God, the book, the Bible itself is from what continent? Asia. Not over here in North America. So we're gonna try to put a North American spin on an Asian book? Yes.
Yeah, that's about like in Japan, you know, when I was in the Marine Corps, they constantly bowed me over there.
Yeah, and I've been in Japan, so I understand exactly what you're saying. You were probably in Okinawa. Okinawa, I was in Tokyo. But my point is that there was not a time that you lived in our house where you didn't come to anybody's house with your shoes on. You took your shoes off. And then there was usually some object in the home that you had to reverence before you walked in the door. But we don't do that, so we don't understand. There was a time that all Christians had a cross in their house. Not only a cross, they even had a picture of Jesus too on the wall. If not Jesus and Martin King too, and maybe one of the Kennedy boys. If not both of them. That was the black home. The ones I went through, and some of the churches I went through. They might not have had the president that was in charge at that time, but they had the one that they loved. He was on the wall. Matter of fact, you walk one way, you see Jesus and an angel. You walk another way, you see Jesus. Then you walk one way, you see Martin Luther King. I'm about that, I'm done. But when you think about it, Father, I love you, praise you, thank you, glorify you for this time we share. That's what your will be done in Jesus' name. Did you get that?
Yes, amen.
At this time, while they're